There was a time when I was a little rat that I really believed that The Last Crusade was the last time I'd ever see Indiana Jones. Boy, do I wish that were true now. But back then, during the early 2000s, I craved adventure. And Indiana Jones was one of those franchises that I always found myself coming back to. Especially Temple of Doom, that shit slapped as a kid. So when I found out Lucasfilms had published an Indiana Jones action platformer, well, I immediately sold all my games just to buy it. You see, I was a businessman. So with nothing else to play and adventure in my heart, Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb became one of my favorite games of all time. Hard cut 20 years later, and the franchise has definitely lost some of its prestige. That, and I become a lot more jaded, faded, and outright dated. So now seems like the perfect time to see just how well Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb has held up since. So grab your leather jackets and dust of those fedoras because we're cracking open the Emperor's Tomb. No, I don't actually own a fedora, thank God. Chapter 1. We start off with very little fanfare and no introduction, as we're dropped off in a far-off jungle. And I'll be honest, things look a lot worse than I remember.
Minecraft Sky, what the hell?
It's partly my fault since I'm emulating the PS2 version, which was always the lowest quality port. That, and I couldn't get the PC version to record, so bite me. Future editor Alex here. So halfway through the game, I figured out how to record the PC version. So if you see sudden quality changes, that's why. You're welcome. Please like and subscribe. But aside from the Minecraft skies and single texture walls, Indy's character model isn't the worst thing I've ever seen. Though it definitely gets more uncanny the longer you look. But hey, at least the parrots look nice. Now, despite the cold opening, we're actually here with a purpose. You see, our jungle fever is due to the idol Karu Watu, which has us raiding the local temples for clues along with anything that isn't nailed down.
Jackpot.
We're archaeologists after all. The first chapter is just us getting to the main temple, serving as an introduction to the gameplay and controls, which on paper are intuitive and straightforward, but in practice, well, it's a wonky fucking mess. Not to say it doesn't work or it ruins the game in any way. In fact, it's kind of charming in a, oh, what's special kind of way. But still, you can definitely feel its age, with the platforming suffering the most with the stiff 2000 controller and their lack of diagonal movement. You see, jumping is very peculiar, only working if done facing straight forward, because the slightest misalignment, and there goes Indy.
Oh,
You can definitely get used to it and even good at it, but it's really up to the game whether you hang or drop.
what the fuck was that?
With certain jumps in the later levels being so precise that you're almost guaranteed to fail, which is made even worse by the checkpoint system, or lack thereof, because falls that cost death will have you restarting the whole mission. But we'll talk more in depth about that later. Now, Indy has a pretty extensive satchel that allows you to carry more than just weapons, adding this inventory management element that changes how we deal with certain encounters, depending on what we have in hand. We also get maps, but they're such low quality that it genuinely hurts my little rat brain anytime I try to figure them out. Indy's health bar mechanic is pretty interesting, with water being how we regain health. And water is in quotations, because knowing Harrison Ford, not that I know him, there's no way that shit isn't spiked. Our cantina holds almost a full bar and can be refilled near fountains, which are scattered throughout most chapters. As far as the combat goes, we start off tame with some classic hand-to-hand and light whipping, both of which come in the heavy and light variety. But only the hand-to-hand seems to have any combos that chain together, making for some unique, albeit wonky looking grappling and bashing. It's pretty basic when it comes to the moveset, but I appreciate the combos for spicing up the gameplay. Our whip, on the other hand, is very multi-purpose, serving both as a weapon and a tool, because aside from the AoE attacks and the disarming moves, we can also use it to clear wider gaps. Where things really escalate is with the gunplay.
You mess with Indy, you get the Cindy. That's the name of the gun.
Because as soon as Indy pulls out the gat and starts murking people, suddenly it starts to feel pretty brutal. Yeah, this Indy straight up executes people, which even as a kid seemed a little out of place. But as far as gun and weapon variety goes, will always come equipped with our trusty revolver. Revolver. That's a hard word to say, but most chapters have new guns and weapons for us to try out. So it's always interesting in that department. With the first chapter having the double barrel, which I can only assume left Indy covered in guts. That being said, you don't get much as far as ammo drops go, but if you play it smart, you'll have enough bullets to go around. But I digress, because our temple escapades have us massacre our way through waves of ivory hunters, paving the way to some close encounters of the crocodilian type. It's a little foreshadowing, which preps us for what's to come, because once we get to the temple, it's sink or swim with a giant albino croc. As a kid, this section made me sweat, but as a grown-ass man, yeah, it still makes me sweat. You see, the croc is fast as fuck.
I'm fast as fuck, boy.
So it's always nibbling at your feet. And by nibbling, I mean feasting. And by feet, I mean entire body. So yeah, it gets pretty tense, especially the first time, where you don't really know where to go. But after a few trials and tribulations, I remembered a little trick that has us trapped a croc behind some bars.
You know what? Yeah, got me a fish. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. He's out of the water. He's out of the water.
And despite the croc being a non-issue, I never felt safe in the water.
Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Oh my god, where is he?
Thankfully, it was just a glitch, so we're able to parkour our way to the artifact without much worries. Worries which would immediately come back after the croc pulls an El Chapo, escaping his prison. This begins a mad dash to the entrance where we're met by a fate worse than death. Nazis.
Intact, Dr. Jones. It's a beautiful day for a swim, is it not?
It wouldn't be Indiana Jones without them, and thankfully we know just how to deal with Nazis. We definitely won't be seeing him again. No way. This first chapter started off slow and without much fanfare, though I guess it's supposed to be a Raiders of the Lost Ark style opening with how we start mid-adventure. And despite my reservations, the nostalgia hit harder than the albino croc. This first chapter is so deeply ingrained into my brain that I just couldn't help but have a great time. Boy, was that gonna change. But Nazi involvement aside, we don't really question the importance of our newly acquired artifact, that is, until an unexpected visit from the Chinese government, in the form of Marshal Kai and his assistant Mei Ying.
We are not tourists, Dr. Jones. I am Marshal Kai Chang of the Chinese Republic. This is my assistant, Mei Ying.
Do I feel our social score rising, or is that just my
Oh, what can I do for you?
Kai clues us into some deep Chinese lore. It's the usual world-ruling MacGuffin hidden within some lost Chinese temple, with there being a 3-piece artifact needed to find the entrance. And thanks to our world-renowned tomb raiding, archaeology, we're already in possession of one of the 3 pieces.
What the heck is that?
It is 1/3 of the Mirror of Dreams. The mirror is the key to finding the crypt's entrance within the tomb.
So as to not diminish our role, Kai hires us to lead the expedition on China's behalf.
Chance to become the first man in the Emperor's tomb? When do we leave?
Leading us to Prague, 1935 Prague, 1935 Nazi-infested Prague. Yeah, you think Indy would stay away, considering our previous encounter with Beck, but just like that friend who's a little too into world history, he just can't stay away from the Nazi stuff. So we began our covert infiltration of a Nazi castle, where the second part of the artifact is being held. Hey, I recognize that ass anywhere. This chapter emphasizes stealth with the introduction of the Luger, which, while weaker than the revolver, it is silent. And since unaware enemies only take a single headshot to go down, it should be an easy time. Except it's not, because stealth doesn't work for shit. Yeah, the enemy placement and AI is set up to always find you, so most of the time you'll be emptying out mags while being chased by the Gestapo. Where this chapter really fails for me is with its puzzle room. Not because it's hard, though Kid Me was definitely too stupid to figure it out, but because it's really long and drawn out, having you find an item, backtrack to the main room, and solve a puzzle 4 separate times, which even as a kid I dreaded, since it just makes running around the castle feel tedious. But despite the tedium, we finish off the puzzle, leading to a bizarre encounter with a secret Nazi experiment. Guess they're Mary Shelley fans, though probably not. They're Nazis. It's not a difficult fight, though he pulls out some forbidden moves, throwing fireballs and picking us up without consent, which we counter with acid to the face and a quick stab to the chest. Our British combo is more than enough to put Frankenstein down, giving us the second part of the artifact. That is, until we're gassed for the third time this chapter.
More gas? What's up with these Nazis?
Yeah, they're really taking the Nazi thing seriously, so that's fun.
Can you hear me? Dr. Jones?
But now incapacitated, we're recaptured by a half-blind Beck, who follows up the gassing with a long train yard out.
Throw him on the train. I will conduct the interrogation when we reach Istanbul.
Despite the cool aesthetic and premise, this chapter is my least favorite, suffering from too much backtracking, confusing corridors, and wonky ledges that make your time in Castle Wolfenstein, Prague, one huge headache. But there's no time to rest as we end up a Nazi prisoner somewhere in Istanbul, not Constantinople, where we get an assist from May, who hints things really aren't as they seem.
The Germans are excavating a city underneath Istanbul.
They found the palace of Belisarius? No wonder Von Beck was in a hurry.
But that's future Indy's problem because we have an artifact to find. And thankfully, the Nazis have already done the hard work of finding the location. So all we have to do is make our way to the dig site. This has us facing off against the people of Istanbul, not Constantinople, and of course the Nazis. And ironically, this becomes a water level once we make it into the dig site, which has us finding 4 scattered coins to open up the main room. But did I mention there's sharks now? Because there's sharks now. While not as tedious as the previous level, it's really easy to miss a coin, and the amount of obstacles make backtracking a pain. But not as painful as the giant squid attack. That's right, we're fighting squids. Not something I expected out of Indiana Jones game, but I'm totally here for it. It's a gimmicky fight that has to shoot his bulbous weak points and set some charges, with there being 4 pillars that you need to destroy. The biggest danger here are the jellyfish, which are constantly pulling you towards the squid. But if you're fast, you can fry the squid in 2 hits.
Oh fuck, I can't believe you've done this.
Leaving us with a water-free room and the final piece of the artifact. Of course, May comes in at the end with no assist, only to reveal that Marshal Kai has double-crossed them and the Nazis, wanting the heart of the dragon for himself.
Why didn't you and Kai warn me about the Nazis?
The man you know as Marshal Kai is not who he appears to be. Kaiti Chan is not just an officer in the army, he's also the head of the Black Dragon Triad, the most powerful criminal syndicate in China.
So with nothing left to lose, we join May on a long flight to China. Chapter 4 starts us off in Hong Kong, not Tijuana, Hong Kong, unfortunately, but mainland China, Hong Kong, where we try our luck with Mei Ying, who immediately shoots us down.
Have I mentioned how absolutely stunning you look in that dress?
It's the 3rd time you've mentioned it, Dr. Jones.
Gotta give him credit for trying to get some puss. But we're actually here to meet some smugglers, who will get us into Kai's fortress. But instead, find the man himself, throwing a wrench into the works.
Enjoy the show, Dr. Jones.
This starts a mad dash out after May gets kidnapped. There's also a slight difficulty increase with the enemies here being a lot tougher, pulling off some kung fu combos that leave us on the brink of death. But it's nothing we can't handle. I didn't hear no bell, bitch. Now, if you haven't noticed, this whole chapter is one big Temple of Doom reference, white suits and all. We even get a street chase, but it's pretty subversive considering the ride, so I kinda like it.
Dr. Jones, I presume.
Yeah, who the hell are you?
My name is Wu Han. I'm here to meet Mei Ying.
Well, you just missed her.
And so I noticed. Please get in. We must hurry.
Don't you own a car?
Post-editing Alex here, I also just realized that Wuhan is actually the guy who gets killed at the very beginning of Temple of Doom, which is fucking crazy. I didn't know, now I do, and it's a lot to take in. In theory, because in practice, the street chase is a repetitive on-rail shooter, which wouldn't be too bad if they had more than one car and bike going after you. The biggest saving grace here is the length, lasting 4 minutes long, which doesn't seem like much, but it's a long time to be shooting the same two enemies non-stop. That being said, this is actually the shortest on-rail segment in the game, so I'm grateful, all things considering. We managed to make it to the docks, only to see Mei Ying and Vec riding a Nazi submarine. And no, that's not a euphemism.
Where are they taking her?
To Kai's fortress, on Penglai Island most likely.
They're en route to Kai's fortress, which is exactly where we need to go. So, no harm, no foul. If anything, we should have hitched a ride, a la Raiders, because the dingy boat we take barely makes it to Pei Ling, meaning we'll have to swim.
Right.
I need to get away from the mic because I'm gonna get a little crazy, maybe even a little stupid, because, well, I don't deny the fact that Indy would probably have to swim a lot in his adventures. It's every other chapter at this point, and it's too much. Indy's literally jumping at the opportunity to get his dick wet, in the most literal sense. And I'd get it if this was the Tomb of Atlantis or some shit like that, but it's not. It's the Emperor's Tomb. Give me more China. Wait, what? No, but that, and I'm tired of these motherfucking sharks in my motherfucking water. Okay, let me get back to the mic now. Thankfully, this is the last time we're gonna have to deal with water to this extent. So, after a few close calls and a lot of dead Nazis later, we begin our long climb up to Kai's fortress, starting with the Nazi base.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
Where we catch a glimpse of Von Vec and Kai's falling out.
You have violated our agreement.
Nonsense. If you are not so incompetent, I would have had no need of Jones. He accomplished more in 2 weeks than you have in the last 2 years.
Watch your tongue!
But with no Mei Ying in sight, we keep the massacre going. And being a Nazi base and all, we deal with an increasing amount of Nazis, with their new fire trooper making a debut. They're really tough at close range, but if you're sneaky enough not to set off any alarms or just straight up murk everybody, then you really don't have to deal with them. And in a similar fashion to the Last Crusade, Indy dons a new fit, which would definitely get him cancelled today.
You need to leave!
But it's okay, he's doing it ironically. We use our new disguise to secure us a bitch seat, taking us deeper into the base. And Chapter 6, where our disguise is immediately busted, leading to a full blown out shootout, as we try to turn the power on to the gondolas. Easy. No! This should take us directly into the fortress, except it's never that easy, as we're made to defend our ride against the Nazi planes, turning this into a pseudo on-rail shooters. This section lasts almost 8 minutes long, making the Hong Kong chase a blink in comparison. That being said, this was the better on-rail shooter, mostly due to the setting. I mean, it's definitely striking, but also the planes add more challenge than the cars, making the shooting feel engaging. Well, as engaging as 2000's rail shooters can be. Now, you'd think that this would get us into the fortress, but no, it's only a layover, meaning we have more Nazi bases to clear out, and another gondola to board. Yeah, this section got surprisingly difficult, mainly because I'm stupid and kept getting blown up, and maybe a few missteps here and there. But since this is the last time we'll face off against the Third Reich, they make sure to throw the kitchen sink. With that said, fighting your way through Nazi-filled bases is prime Indiana Jones, and despite the last 2 chapters ultimately being just one big arc, this is probably my favorite part of the game. There's something about killing Nazis that unsurprisingly never gets old, and probably never will. But psychopathic tendencies aside, we end things with one last gondola ride, and some more on-rail shooting. Yeah, I know, it's crazy that we have to do it again, but thankfully it's only about a minute long, which more than anything makes me question the inclusion. But I guess this is the perfect time to bring up the pacing issues, specifically with chapter structure and length. So there's 10 chapters in total, with each chapter being split into smaller sections, serving both as checkpoints and a way to keep performance and stability, allowing for bigger chapters as a whole, which at face value seem like a well-structured way to keep the game feeling big, but in reality it's to its detriment, With too many subsections like the 4-part puzzle in Chapter 2 or the second gondola ride in Chapter 6 feeling like unnecessary padding, which again, great for the length and content, is horrible for pacing. Speaking of, Chapter 7 starts off with no fanfare yet again, as we're teleported directly outside the fortress. I was genuinely questioning if I had skipped a cutscene, but no, it's just jank. There's honestly a few moments with weird cuts like this, but honestly, it's more charming than anything, so, I forgive it. That being said, we can finally put all the Nazi stuff behind us, as we get a very aesthetic change of scenery. Now, this is what I expected when I hear Emperor's Tomb, not swimming with sharks. And it's definitely a breath of fresh air. From the scenery to the enemies, it's all new. Kai's guard don't hit quite as hard as the kung fu wielding triads, but these guys are fully equipped with crossbows and spears, and armor, so they can still do a number. But despite their numbers, we're constantly supplied with arrows for our new crossbow, so ironically, the hardest part of getting into the fortress was the platforming. And in general, it always has been. It's wonky, unreliable. It's the source of most of my deaths, and honestly, I love it. Yeah, I know, I'm quirky, right? The thrill that comes from not knowing whether a simple jump will cost you 20 minutes of progress, and the dopamine hit that comes from making it, is still unmatched. Granted, I don't play too many platformers nowadays, but I can almost guarantee that the risk-reward ratio is nothing compared to the retro games. So yeah, I'll take my balls retracting into my pelvis over boring platforming any day.
Oh my god, I almost died! I almost died!
But yeah, this double whip jump was and still is the bane of my existence. I couldn't make it for the life of me until I did. Don't ask me how I did it, I just fucking did it. But that doesn't matter, because we finally make it inside, where we see a very animated Marshal Kai devolving his plans to sacrifice Mei Ying.
The dragon will be mine, and all who oppose me will be swept aside in the storm that follows.
We jump in for the rescue, only to be accosted by the Fate twins.
Business before pleasure, Mei Mei. The master wants his head on a stake.
They're Kai's personal security and a childhood crush. Yeah, respectfully, they can kick my ass any day. No, seriously, they have some pretty cool combo attacks that are worth getting hit by at least once, or twice, or 3 times. So yeah, the hardest part of this fight is having the willpower to dodge their attacks. But once we get over those reservations, they get the equal rights and lefts like every other goon we faced.
This'll hurt more than your feelings, sweetheart. I don't hit women, but in your case, I'll make an exception.
From there, it's 2 steps back as we take the long way down to the Contian Temple and Mission 8, where things get a little spooky as we get our first taste of the supernatural. Now, despite the giant squid and monster croc, the game has pretty much been grounded in reality. Yeah, there's also Frankenstein. So to suddenly introduce flying skeletons and kung fu zombies, it definitely comes out of left field. Or at least I like to think that, since it never really bothered me as a kid. Frankly, I've always enjoyed the more fantastical aspects of the series, at least before the Crystal Skull. Yeah, they kind of overdid it for me. Not to mention, it's also a good way to prime you for the final act, which might require some suspension of disbelief with how bombastic it can get. But for now, we have a temple to ransack and zombies to kill. The zombies go down a lot easier than I remember, but they have some physics-defined moves that leave you on the floor, so you really have to focus on thinning out the herd before they start to gang up. Contian's Temple is retroactively one of my favorite chapters in the game, being both perfect in length and content. It's similar to the Nazi base infiltration with how it embodies what I think an Indiana Jones game should ultimately be. With this chapter specifically hitting all the marks. It even has another 4-door puzzle, but it's actually really well done, with each room having a different obstacle, rather than it being a fetch quest like in chapter 2. And to top it all off, the reward we get for completing the puzzle is out of this world. Literally, we get a smart disc from Predator and it's pretty overpowered. It's self-guided, so all you really have to do is throw. And if you want to get personal with it, you can also use it as a hand blade. But where it really shines is with its ability to bust ghosts, making it just what we needed to clear out the temple. Did I mention it also makes you walk like you just shit yourself? Because it does that too. But I digress, because we get out just in time to catch Kai and Mei mid-ritual, which we promptly interrupt. Causing a Freaky Friday side effect that I completely forgot about, as Mei Ying becomes possessed by what I can only assume to be Contian himself. Which, if that's the case, my dude was a freak. He gives us a whole taste of the underworld, and I don't like it. Dude, she's face fucking us! Oh my god. Like every other boss fight so far, it's a simple but fun fight. This one has you dodging and fighting off ghosts while you wait for an opening. And once you destroy the 3 orbs, Contian is gone as fast as he arrived. But yeah, this boss fight never made too much sense as a kid. I always thought it was one of the Fei twins, so realizing it was Mei after all this time was a nice little twist. But also, we get another weird cut, and this time it's to the boat. It feels more like an ending scene than anything, which makes it stand out as weird.
See? That wasn't so bad.
Chapter 9 is yet another banger that sees us infiltrate the Emperor's tomb.
Getting in here was easier than I expected.
It's more mini puzzles like the Contian Temple, so I'm all for it. But once we manage to puzzle our way into the inner tomb, we are greeted by Kai's men, meaning we're a little late to the party. A party which Von Beck crashes. This starts a really fun chase, which has always reminded me of that Crash Bandicoot Dino level, with the way the camera's placed and the whole obstacle course. And it's not the longest thing, though some of the double jumps make for some pretty close calls. But where I really kept botching it up was at the very end. You see, the last jump is a super simple slide and whip, but I just couldn't do it. It's one of those wonky jumps I was talking about, which I've always failed. And yeah, this time was no different. So that was a nostalgic trip. But after too many attempts, we are finally able to clear the jump, saving us from Von Beck, who takes our place, falling into the abyss. Things only escalate from here as we realize the legends were true. Yeah, I'm not sure what those legends were, but they probably had something to do with this portal. And with fortune and glory on our mind, we jump right in, leading us to chapter 10. It's the Netherworld, and where the real Emperor lies. Of course, the portal drops us nowhere near him, so we start making our way to the center, requiring some more ghost busting and puzzle solving. Nothing adult me can't handle. Just don't ask how long it took me to beat this as a kid. It took too long. I was a little special back then. Inside the tomb, we see a very lively Emperor trying his hardest to play dead. So when we borrow the dragon's heart out of his mouth, he immediately starts tripping balls. Leading to what I can only assume was a heart attack. And not wanting to take the blame for the Emperor's second death, we try to escape, but are caught on the way out by Marshal Kai, who takes the dragon's heart and Emperor's power for himself, almost ending us there and then.
Fool! Did you really think that a common thief would be allowed to leave the crypt with the dragon's heart? Only a true servant of Contian can wield its awesome power. At last, the power of the first Emperor is mine.
But thankfully for us, Mei Ying comes in for the assist. And honestly, it's kinda sweet.
I thought you were dead.
I nearly was until you showed up.
I guess that makes us even.
though it doesn't last long and she's immediately incapacitated for our final encounter against Marshal Kai. And with the Emperor's power, he starts doing some crazy shit, pulling out an ancient dragon right out of his ass. Which as a kid was the coolest freaking thing, and even as a jaded adult, I still think it's pretty freaking cool. Yeah, this fight isn't too challenging once you know what you're doing, with the only way to damage Kai is by supercharging the smart disc. Now, Kai only has like 3 different attacks, with the dragon assist being the hardest to dodge and probably what I died to the most. Then he's got the sweeping fire attack that radiates out and staggers you if you don't jump, making for some close calls. And lastly, he's got this laser blast, but it never hit me, so I can't speak to its power. For all I know, it's just slight. But after supercharging and hitting Kai 5 times, he's weakened enough for the Emperor's ghost to call it quits, disowning Kai and feeding him to the dragon.
What's happening?
The souls of the Emperor's victims, they've come for their revenge.
Let's get out of here. Follow me.
Hard cut to the Golden Lotus, where we wind down after a long adventure.
That's an incredible story.
Not that I have anything to show for it.
You have the undying gratitude of the Chinese people.
I'd rather have the gratitude of one person in particular.
That sounds like fun.
And despite losing the heart of the dragon back in the Netherworld, the Emperor's tomb was the friends we made along the way. Or something like that. Look, we're getting lucky, so it's a win-win.
But Indy, we were supposed to meet with Lao She to talk to him about that Nurhachi job.
R.I.P. Wu, never forget. This might be it for Indy, but like most games in the early 2000s, there's some extra content for us to unlock. Taking the form of artifacts, each chapter has 3, so there's a good amount to collect, adding some replayability to the game. Furthermore, the artifacts also unlock some concept art, which would be really cool if they weren't all super low res. I guess my eyes are just spoiled from all the 4K footage nowadays, so it's really not fair. In the end, Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb isn't everything I remembered it to be. In fact, it's longer and jankier than I expected. But despite that, this game holds such a special place in my heart that any negative aspect is completely negated by the nostalgia I feel for it. That being said, it's far from perfect. The combat, while filled with interesting weapons, becomes repetitive and stale, with each chapter only having 2 enemy models to face. It's also overly padded, with most chapters having too many subsections, making the gameplay loop feel a little tedious. But worst of all, there was too much damn swimming. Okay, I'm half joking there, but it really did bug me how often we had to swim. But of course, retroactive issues aside, it still doesn't diminish my love for the game. It's like an abusive partner. I know I'm just gonna keep coming back. Okay, that was a horrible analogy there. But seriously, for everything it did wrong, it did so much right. The characters, for example, while a bit over the top, perfectly embody that Indiana Jones cast that you come to expect. May is a great subversion on the indie girl, and while she falls into the damsel in distress role, so does Indy, so it kinda evens out. Von Vec is a walking, talking Nazi stereotype, and I'm all for it. Marshal Kai has great motivations and presence as the lead antagonist, and I will say, Indy is almost a flanderization of himself, with the amount of times he says, "I have a bad feeling about this," and his sexually charged comments every time he sees a hot chick, which, same, I mean, who doesn't want some pussy after a long adventure? But I feel like it's just the perfect amount of camp, making the dialogue kinda charming in a sexist, chauvinistic kind of way.
Be careful, Dr. Jones. The path to the dragon's heart is more dangerous than you can imagine.
It always is, sweetheart.
You get it? She's the dragon. The locations also come to mind, with each chapter being varied and visually stunning, despite the hardware limitations. And it genuinely feels like an adventure, taking place all around the globe. It's a great game despite its age, and it seems like a lot of people feel that way now, with the game being a lot more highly rated than when it first came out. This is partly due to a 2015 re-release, but I think nostalgia plays a bigger role, especially when you see the reviews. Yeah, they're all just sucking indie cock. But despite my love for indie and defense of his game, I don't think it's a 9 out of 10. In fact, I find myself leaning more towards the original scores, those 6s and 7s, because it's definitely the best Indiana Jones game out there, especially if you're a fan. But casual players will see this and probably think it's just an average game, maybe even subpar. That being said, whoever is playing the Emperor's Tomb in 2024 is probably the perfect audience. So while it might not be the gem I wanted it to be, it's the artifact my nostalgic little brain needed.
Nice fans.
Alright, that's gonna do it for Indie. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more retrospectives and other garbage like this. And of course, let me know how you guys feel down below. Do you see the appeal to the Emperor's Tomb, or is it just another action platformer with too many swimming sections? Probably the latter. Also, which Fate Twin is hotter? Make sure you comment that down below. Personally, I like green, so there's that. But yeah, that's gonna do it. Don't forget your mom loves you, stay poochy, and I'll catch you on the next one.